Hello and welcome to episode 61 of the Ohio Huntsman Podcast. And if you missed last week's episode, this is sort of a continuation of last week's episode. So last week we talked to Mike Tonkovich, who is the deer program administrator for the Division of Wildlife. And we talked to him about his predictions for this upcoming season. We're already into the season, but we talked to him about this season, what he is expecting, what he's hoping to get out of this season as far as hunter success, participation, that kind of thing, harvest numbers, and really interesting conversation. He had a lot of interesting facts and details to share. So if you didn't listen to that one, I'd encourage you to go back and listen to that. And then this was the second half of our conversation, and I decided to break it up into two episodes. So in this part of the conversation, we talk about crossbows. So Ohio was one of the first states to allow crossbows as a hunting implement, and not only allow them, but also then give them equal status to other types of archery equipment. So we talk about that, why that was, if there's any thoughts or desires on changing any of that. And we really enjoyed this conversation. It was, Mike had tons of interesting facts on the crossbow story, the history of how that sort of came to be. So really interesting conversation, and I think you guys are going to like it. So before we get into that conversation, I want to talk about our sponsor, Monster Whitetail Grub. So you heard me talking. I took my daughter out, and we were using some Monster Whitetail Grub. And while we didn't get a deer in front of us, that wasn't Monster Whitetail Grub's fault. It was more of a take my daughter out there, and we're going to sit and whisper to each other. She's 3, so she wasn't super terribly quiet, but we had fun. And that was the fact that we didn't see a deer was no fault of Monster Whitetail Grubs, because on our way out, I checked my camera and we had lots of pictures of deer coming in. So it's a great product. You've heard us talk about it for a while now, and we've just had really good success with it. So they've got their traditional high protein feed. It's got mineral mixed in, and then you can get additives and different flavorings mixed in, so it really works well. They've also got straight mineral, and they've got a flavored corn option, and they've got a handful of different flavors. They've got white oak acorn, persimmon. I can never remember the whole list because there's quite a few different flavor options and add-ins. Like you can get whole peanuts added to the mix. So if you're looking for feed, if that's something you want, if you want to try that as a hunting tactic, or just have it out to supplement your deer, keep them in the area, whatever you're looking for, I would encourage you to try Monster Whitetail Grub. There'll be a link in the show notes on how to get a hold of them and try some of their product. And with that, let's get into the episode. Welcome to the Ohio Huntsman Podcast, where 3 brothers, Jason, Jacob, and Jeff, discuss all things hunting in Ohio. Our goal is to be your source for accurate and reliable hunting news and conservation issues in the great state of Ohio, as well as some fun and interesting conversations along the way. This is the Ohio Huntsman Podcast.
Are you listening?
So now the next thing that we wanted to talk about was crossbows. So again, we're into the archery opener, or it opens tomorrow at the time of this recording. And so this was actually Jeff's idea to reach out to you and have a discussion about crossbows. So the 3 of us, Jacob, Jeff, and I, we all hunt with crossbows. We started out only gun hunting, and then, crossbow was kind of an easy transition, right? It was kind of familiar, that sort of thing. And so we've just stuck with crossbows. But since this was Jeff's idea, I'm going to kind of let him lead off here. So Jeff, if you would, let's talk about crossbows.
Yeah. So Ohio, as far as I can tell, was one of the first states to really widely adopt the use of crossbows for all hunters. I know a lot of other states. I was just in Colorado. I was wearing my 10-point crossbow hat, and I had someone say, "Oh, you enjoy the challenge of hunting with a crossbow," and they were basically thinking that I would hunt with this crossbow during gun season because that's basically the only time you can use a crossbow in Colorado.
Okay.
And it's like, no, Ohio crossbows are just like regular bows, there's no additional restrictions.
Right.
So I was kind of wondering if you could shed some light on why Ohio was so early to adopt the use of crossbows for all hunters.
That's a really, really good question, and I actually had to call the wonderful gentleman that hired me, who was the deer project leader at the time that crossbows were legalized in Ohio. Which, for those who are looking for a little history lesson, I'm happy to oblige and talk a little bit about the history of crossbows in Ohio. Jeff, you're right on the money. In 1976, when Ohio legalized crossbows, we were only the third state in the country. I believe Arkansas legalized crossbows. In fact, I'm almost sure it was 1963 when they legalized crossbows. The only other state where crossbows had full inclusion like they do now in Ohio at that time would have been Wyoming. So 1976. Crossbows were legalized, and they were. I don't know if you were able to get back in, how far you were able to go back and look at the digest, but I will mention that a couple facts here. In 1976, we added 2 weeks to the end of what would have been about a 3-month long archery season. So crossbow hunters had the last 2 weeks of the archery season, so not much of an opportunity, that's for sure. But nonetheless, they got in, right? And then 1977 through 1981, the Division of Wildlife gradually extended the crossbow season, adding a week or two every year until 1982. Crossbows were legal the entire archery season. So vertical bow hunters and crossbow hunters enjoyed the same, roughly at that time would have been about a 4-month long season. So what happened in 1976? It's probably one of the more intriguing mysteries, if you will, for me, having worked now for almost 25 years with the Division of Wildlife and knowing how difficult some things are to change. When I think about the crossbow season, the crossbow being legalized in 1976, it's mind-boggling to pull something off like that. Now, I was a freshman in high school, so I have no idea how it was. I have no idea how it was done. But think about this. Think about the odds. Think about what would have been pushing back on the agency at that time. In 1976, or I should say, let's go back to 75. Okay, the year before crossbows were legalized. That year we harvested 14,972 deer. Okay. Across the entire state. In fact, only 68 of our 88 counties were even open to deer hunting. And there were 119,000, which is actually more hunters than I would have imagined. There were 119,000, almost 120,000 deer hunters in the state.
Wow. So
think about this for a second. And I guess, not being in my position, you really can't appreciate how difficult something like this had to have been, because going through most of my career, and there's one other fact that I should mention in terms of the difficulty of getting a crossbow season passed. It wasn't until 2003, up until 2003, the only states in the country were still Ohio, Arkansas, and Wyoming, where hunters had crossbow hunters had full inclusion in the archery season. Not until 2003, and when Georgia legalized crossbows, they were the fourth state, right? So that's how much resistance existed against crossbows. Yet we were able to do it in 1976 with virtually no deer in the state. We had obviously, if you look back at the history, we had closed the season multiple times after deer hunting returned to the state in 1943 because we had over harvested deer numbers, right? And somehow we managed to add an implement to the choices that hunters could use. Now, granted, it was only 2 weeks. It was only 2 weeks at the end of the season, and I think so. I don't know for sure how it was done. I went back and I dug through the archives. It was either a long drawn out process or it was a snap decision, and I can't find really any information on either one of those, any evidence to support either one of those. So I'm grateful, and I think Ohioans should be grateful that happened. I think that was a difficult decision to say the least, but it really changed. We would not be where we are today. I'm sure of that if crossbows. We can talk a little bit more about that if crossbows were not legalized back then. But so how did it happen, and what made it possible? And I think the key. And this is probably why it took so long for so many other states to adopt a crossbow. And this is where Ohio was unique. In 1976, all that legalizing crossbows did was give you a choice. It didn't give you an additional deer in the bag. It didn't give you a longer season. It didn't give you, well, some may have thought that it gave you an advantage. But it all it did was give you an implement choice. You couldn't kill an additional deer. We didn't increase the quota. All it did was say, so what you found yourself as a hunter in the state of Ohio in 1976, if you wanted to try one of these newfangled crossbows, you had to decide, if I kill this deer with a crossbow, I'm done. I mean, I can't kill another deer. I've got to make a decision. And it's always been that way. Now, most other states with weapon-specific or season-specific licenses, Ohio is very unique in that regard. There are very few states, if any, that have you buy a permit, you can hunt with whatever season is legal or whatever implement is legal at the time. Most states have season-specific licenses, season-specific permits, season-specific bag limits, weapon-specific, if you will. Okay, Wisconsin, you want to hunt with a crossbow, you're going to have to buy a crossbow license. You want to hunt with a vertical bow, you're going to buy a vertical bow license. And that entitles you to additional deer, right? That license comes with it opportunities to harvest additional deer. Okay. Not in Ohio. It did not. You had a choice. So we weren't killing any additional deer. We were simply shifting from, we were killing them in a different manner. That's all that it did. Now, naturally, knowing how hunters are, really oppose change, which I can appreciate. I wouldn't be surprised if there are people, I got to say this, there are probably folks that don't want to see the 18-digit permit go away now. I mean, that's my good friend Mike Rex once told me. He said, Mike, people will complain if you lower the price of the permit, and he was absolutely right. When we effectively, because their argument was it's going to put more people in the woods. I've got to compete with more people.
Right. So, yeah.
Change is really hard to come by, and to pull something. I mean, it's just, I don't mean to get overexcited about that, but to pull that off in 1976, there were no other states that you could really point to. Arkansas was not a Midwestern state. We oftentimes will look at, okay, what are our neighbors doing? All right, if that's not good enough, let's cast a wider net. What are the Midwest states doing? You had no one else to look at, nothing else to go on,
right.
No other data, and somehow it managed to happen. And it's been a great thing. I mean, it really has. You guys are prime examples. And one of the things, in terms of, hey, I was a gun hunter. I recognize that I could really hunt a lot longer. I could hunt in the rut. I could hunt in nicer weather. What am I waiting for? And what's wrong with that, right?
Right.
And then the one thing that I think a lot of folks don't recognize, and I don't know whether you guys will ever see yourself moving in this direction, but I would argue that the crossbow has actually created compound bow archers, because I think maybe if you have the time, there is that interest to push that a little bit further. I figured out how to get close to deer. Now I want an additional challenge. Let's be honest. The compound takes a little more practice, and I think so. I think there. I don't know whether you guys have plans to do that, have given any thought to that, but I know that there are folks that have gone from gun hunting to crossbow hunting to eventually picking up a vertical bow simply because they believe in their mind that is, it's a little more challenging. It takes a little more commitment. It takes a little more time. And again, I hunt with both of them. I have both, and I think there's a place for both of them definitely in the woods. I like to hunt with my compound when the weather's nice. When the I hunt during the colder weather with the crossbow because it doesn't require you shake a lot more and it's a little more forgiving.
Sure.
So anyway, enough on that. The history of the crossbow there in Ohio, and I'll finish with some dates and then we can kind of dive in a little further if you'd like. But so 1982, that was a milestone year when Crossbows had the entire season with vertical bow hunters. 1989 would have been the first year that crossbow hunters exceeded vertical bow hunters in terms of the harvest. And today we're right around 62, 61, 39, 62, 38%. I was really quite surprised. It had been a few years since I actually looked at that number, because for the longest time it was easy to remember. It was 55 crossbow, 45 vertical bow, and now it's really moved up a good bit. 62 is 62, 38, 61, 39%. So certainly taking a good chunk of accounting for a large chunk of the archery harvest here in Ohio. That's my history lesson.
That's that was perfect. That I have a handful of follow-up questions. I'm glad you mentioned the crossbow converting to a vertical bow or a compound bow, because I know I have definitely considered that. Right now I've got a 3-year-old little girl, and so my free time or my time to practice with a compound bow is sort of non-existent. And so at some point when maybe my schedule and my time kind of lightens up a little bit, I definitely want to look into hunting with a compound bow. So that's an interesting sort of factoid there or tidbit. So I guess I got so many thoughts jumbling around in my head now. So so I'm just like, I'm in shock, I guess, that I didn't realize. I knew Ohio was an early state. I didn't realize that we were so early and it was sort of unprecedented. And so I'm with you. I'm kind of reeling at the fact that like they were able to get it done, and then they're not too many years thereafter, crossbows and vertical bows had the same, were given the same rights, if you will.
Yeah, I think, the biggest, obviously, no secret here, the biggest hurdle was bringing them into the season. And of course, 2 weeks was designed to, that was the door opening, right? And that was the biggest hurdle. But I think folks quickly, because it wasn't long. I mean, it only took 5 or 6 years, and they had equal rights as vertical bow hunters. So I think that was, that took a lot of backbone to get that done. And I wish I would have been part of that, because I mean that, you talk about legacies, that really, leaving a legacy, that's not that it's a giant one, but I mean, I think that was probably one of the more significant things that in terms of our deer program that ever happened. Because I think, I said, I believe in my heart of hearts that we would never have really caught up with where other states are. You wait 30 years to adopt a crossbow. During that time period, guys, what happened was, it just encouraged. We had more hunters hunting in the woods for a longer period of time, and I guess we really have to talk about another, I guess, coincidental event was this willingness of our hunters to shoot antlerless deer, and that's always been that. That's another great discussion someday. Is this this willingness of Ohio hunters to shoot antlerless deer, and again, that there's a history. There's a great explanation for, at least in my opinion, why that is. But I think having that many hunters with that much opportunity, to harvest antlerless deer has been one of the reasons why we've been so successful in terms of our ability to manipulate Ohio's deer herd, and we're really quite unique. We're one of a few states left in the Midwest that feels that they can actually, change the direction of their deer population in most areas, and that's because we've got. And we should talk, the changes in society, demographic changes, aging hunters, more places. Think about the opportunities that you guys, that the crossbow, because it's archery tackle, that it opens up for you. And that's probably one of the key things is the opportunity, the doors that archery hunting opens for you guys, especially living in Northeast Ohio. Better than anybody. I mean, you could theoretically hunt before work. You could hunt on your lunch break. You certainly can hunt after work, and you don't have to drive to Washington County to do that, right?
Right.
And so the crossbow, think about it. If you only had vertical bows, where would we be? All those opportunities. I don't know. In fact, I suspect if you look at the vertical bow hunter number trends, I'm sure that those, that vertical bow hunters would have filled in, the gaps if we were to pull crossbows out of the equation. So lots of opportunity, getting hunters in early, keeping them in late. And again, just being able to take advantage of those opportunities that otherwise would not be available to many hunters. And of course, we've probably talked at length or could talk at length about, the loss of hunters. And I think that's one of the things that it's keeping guys and gals in the game longer, not only because of their age, but because of the opportunities. Busy lifestyles. You mentioned it, Jason. I mean, that's a perfect example. I mean, you can get out there, you can make sure that, your crossbow is ready to go 2 or 3 times through the season, do the same thing, but you don't have to go to a range. You don't have to practice every single night, but you can still do everything that you need to do. You can hunt, you can enjoy the outdoors, you can take your daughter with you into the blind, all of those things. And again, it's just countless opportunities that I think really profound impact on our deer program and our ability to manage our deer herd simply because of that opportunity that was created, almost 40 years ago or more.
Yeah. Well, and the opportunity, like you said, right now, it's opportunity is probably more important than ever with hunter numbers declining. I read a lot. I've seen countless Facebook posts that like, oh, got a shoulder injury, I'm going to hunt with a crossbow this year, or I'm getting too old, I can't draw my bow, or it allows youth to get in earlier to archery hunting, right? Because they don't need that minimum draw weight, right? They can either have somebody cock the bow for them, or they've got bows that you can crank a handle to cock now, I mean, so it's just more opportunity, which is super important as hunter numbers continue to decline. I want to pause here real quick to talk about our sponsor, Mastins Deer Scents. So Mastins is a premium scent company, and they make a lot of different and interesting scents. One of the scents that they make is called Smell Like a Deer, and I've been seeing pictures from a lot of the Mastins Pro staff that have been having really good success with the Smell Like a Deer scent this early season. And then as we start to transition into the pre-rut time frame and into the rut, they've got scents that sort of fit that time of season. And so whatever you're looking for, if you're looking for scent as a hunting tool, as a hunting tactic, maybe to help stop deer in front of your camera, or use it as a cover scent or an attractant, whatever you need, they've got it. And so I would encourage you to check them out, mastinsdeerscents.com. There'll be a link in the show notes, so you don't have to remember the URL. Just click the link and check them out, and you can order right from their website. So with that, let's get back into the episode.
Yeah, and it's access, of course, is really limited. So it does. I hate to sound like a broken record, but the archery opportunities, especially more and more cities, suburbs, towns are opening up, dropping ordinances and allowing controlled hunting opportunities. You're not going to see straight-walled cartridge hunting opportunities, in Baker Heights, right? or Medina. I mean, but you're very well may see some controlled archery opportunities. So, and those those are the difference, in my opinion, can be the difference between someone saying, you know what, I'm done with hunting. And so having that opportunity close to home with a busy lifestyle, I think is a great thing. And you mentioned age, Jason, and I've got to mention that there's actually, this is not anecdotal. I mean, there is data to support. It's amazing how similar our data is with Wisconsin. Crossbows were legal there in 2014 for the entire archery season. So they now have four seasons under their belt. But when you look at the age distribution, it's amazing how similar our data is with Wisconsin in terms of distribution. Mine is harvest data. There's because they have vertical bow and crossbow licenses, as I mentioned. They're exactly, I mean, they look like mirror images of each other. And I know you can't see them, but I can describe to you some of the details and some of the high points of those graphs. And when you look at the imagine age across the x-axis and percent of the harvest or percent of the license sold on the y-axis, invariably, Wisconsin or Ohio, you see that vertical bow hunters peak at about age 25, 26, right? There's a dramatic peak there in terms of participation by young males, 25 to 28 years old, right? Okay. But in Ohio, after that, it drops off dramatically, and you get to age 47. At every age class beyond age 47, crossbow hunters account for more of the harvest than vertical bow hunters. And it's even really dramatic as you get out past like 65. You know, the crossbow hunters are still going strong, so to speak, like the ever ready bunny. And then you drop drop back to the younger ages. Rather dramatic. Same situation. You get below 15 years of age, and for every age class there, crossbow hunters are accounting for more of the harvest than vertical bow hunters. And again, license sales in Wisconsin support the same thing. It's just amazing how similar they are. So there's opportunity to get in early, and most certainly, for us guys that are getting that are getting older, that crossbow provides lots of opportunity to stay, an additional 5, 6, maybe even 10 more years doing something that you really enjoy.
Right. So I know you mentioned them briefly there, but can you circle back and give us the stat one more time on the percentage of crossbow harvest versus vertical bow harvest?
Yeah, absolutely. It was this past year, 2018 season, it was actually 61% of the total archery kill. Last year, you may recall, was around 80,000 deer. 60% of that was taken by crossbow hunters, 61%, and then the balance, 39%, was taken by vertical bow hunters. Okay. The exact, let's see here. I think I may have the numbers. Yeah, it was crossbow hunters accounted for 50,709. Vertical bow hunters, let me back that up. That was the average, 52,149, and then the vertical bow hunters were at just about 27,000.
Okay. So, we've touched a little bit on how other states handle crossbows versus vertical bows. Has Ohio ever considered, or to your knowledge, are they considering changing or I guess maybe going back to different, like having a different season for crossbows versus vertical bows? Because, like we talked, vertical bows or traditional bows, they are a little bit more of a handicap, certainly with a traditional bow. Is there any talk of splitting those out with, the challenge of a compound bow or traditional sort of vertical bow gear versus crossbow gear?
No, they're really. I don't think that there's from 76 after 1982 for sure. I don't think that there was ever any discussion of ever. Now, of course, I didn't start to 95, so I'm guessing. But looking back through, because crossbows, you guys can imagine, early 2000s, every state that was considering a crossbow season, I mean, I was the spokesperson. Can you send us your data? Can you send? Yeah. I haven't talked to a state probably in 6 or 7 years, so it's really gotten quiet. But so my point in mentioning that is I really did a lot of work going back through the files. My boss did a great job keeping track of everything, and it doesn't appear as there was ever any consideration for modifying the crossbow season after 1982. Once it was in place, again, change is difficult. Getting change, positive or negative, is difficult, and changing it back is even more difficult. So I can't think of any reason why we would want to break those out. Folks ask me, sounds like, Jeff, your experience there in Colorado, folks ask about the challenges that we face managing the two user groups. And I'm like, what challenges? I don't spend a lot of time online, I'll be honest with you, but the squawking that used to go on to a limited extent between the two groups is virtually non-existent. It's archery hunting, as most, I think, in most people. Now, traditional archers, I think, are probably still going to object to that idea, but I think at the end of the day, for the most part, folks see archery tackle as archery tackle, whether it's a crossbow or vertical bow.
Yeah.
So to sum up, no, we have there hasn't been any discussion at all, no talk whatsoever of doing anything to modify the archery season in any manner whatsoever.
Okay, great. Jeff, did you have something? I get the sense that you want to chime in with something.
Well, yeah, I was just really excited to kind of learn the history of crossbows in Ohio because, every article I've ever read about a state trying to implement crossbows basically says, oh, Ohio's been doing it for years, and they still have 200-inch bucks and a good deer harvest, and I never really knew the story behind it, but just every state always pointed to Ohio when they wanted to implement crossbows.
Yeah, guys, one of the things that we attempted to do, I know that that's always an interesting argument because I wish I had, the difficulty is knowing where we would be without the crossbows. All I can do is guess where we would be. We'd be, instead of harvesting 4 200-inch bucks every year, some would argue that we'd be harvesting 8, right? So yeah. I don't know where we would be, and we're still putting deer in the Boone and Crockett Club every single year. We're obviously harvesting world-class deer year in and year out. So I don't know that I don't know where we would be without that. So having that conversation is one that I tend to steer clear of because it's knowing what goes into harvesting and producing world-class deer is obviously very, very complicated. And a single weapon choice, I don't know that that's actually much of a factor. But sure. One of the things that comes up a lot, and one of the things that I think people can relate to is success rates and wounding rates. And so we did a small survey after, as part of our 2014-15 deer hunter survey. Anybody that archery hunted indicated that they archery hunted. We set out, asked them if they would be willing to take a sub-survey, if you will, dealing with archery tackle and success rate and shots taken and so on and so forth. And I think we ended up with about, almost 1,400 surveys. Yeah, 1,400 surveys. So a pretty good sample of surveys. And this would, of course, been with crossbow and vertical bow hunters. And I won't dwell on the details, but I'll share with you just a couple facts. And this information is all available on our website in one of our summaries. And if not, I can certainly get it to you. But, at the end of the day, what we found with those 1,400 people that responded to our survey, for instance, compound bow, we looked at, they reported 955 harvest attempts, 655 of those connected for a wounding rate, for a hit rate, if you will, of 68, almost 69%. They recovered 539 deer. At the end of the day, that translated to an 18% wounding rate. Drop down to the crossbows. They hit 74% of the deer. So we're talking, almost an insignificant difference in terms of hit. Sure. Recovery was about the same. They ended up with a 19% wounding rate. And traditional archery tackle, as you would expect, had a much higher wounding rate of about 30%. But really and truly, at the end of the day, virtually no difference between the two bow types in terms of hunter success. And I think this has been demonstrated elsewhere. Now, the one thing that you have to keep in mind when we talk about success rates, and we have to circle back to we're kind of limited here. These are. It's fair to compare the two archery types, but to compare Ohio bow hunter success rates with other state success rates would not be a wise thing to do necessarily, because remember, this was you shoot a deer with a crossbow or a vertical bow, you have limited your opportunities elsewhere. So there's a lot that goes into making that decision. Do I want to shoot this deer with a bow, or do I want to wait till muzzleloader season, or do I want to shoot it with a straight wall cartridge? So you're competing against yourself. So you have to take that with the grant. The within state comparisons are very valid, comparing our success rates to other state success rates, because we don't have separate licenses and permits, if you will, for those two archery types. Our success rates are going to be, I'm sure, much, much lower. But there's been a ton of myths. You go back, Wisconsin, they shared a presentation with the Midwest Deer Turkey Group in Indiana in August, and they went over a couple things. They had crossbow hunters that were complaining that, or vertical bow hunters that were complaining that crossbow guys take more deer on public land. I mean, they were looking for every possible chink in the armor, if you will, to try to challenge them. And every single time the DNR came back with lots of data to say, sorry, but that's not the case at all. They're really not that different. Their bow just cocks different than your bow does. That's pretty much it. Or draws different, I should say. Yeah.
Well, this has been, as always, our conversations with you are super enjoyable, super enlightening. So I've really enjoyed the conversation. Anything else that we didn't touch on, Mike, that you want to get in there?
Really, I had some things that I had on my desk, and I think that we covered nearly all of them. Just looking very quickly to make sure. I don't want to keep you guys.
Sure. Yeah.
Participation. I guess another time we could talk about participation rates and how the crossbow. In Wisconsin. I guess my point of bringing that back up is that it's showing very similar things in Wisconsin. It's providing opportunities for lots more hunter days. I mean what's interesting is Ohio's been really, really quite unique. Guys, this year, archers they are knocking on the door of 50%. They're just below 50% of the total harvest. That's unheard of practically anywhere else in the country in terms of portion of the harvest taken by archers. Now, New Jersey, I think, as you might not be surprised by that, I think archers account for a larger proportion of the total harvest there than they do in Ohio. There's not a lot of places to hunt with a gun in New Jersey, so that sort of makes sense. But the archers are likely to account for almost 50. They'll probably be at 50% of the total harvest this year, which is amazing when you think back to 1979. I don't believe we had even the statewide muzzleloader season yet, or maybe it's 19. Boy, all these numbers are starting to run together. Was it 71 or 79? I'm not sure. Gosh, I should have that committed to memory. But we had a 6-day season. The gun hunters in that 6-day season accounted for 91% of the total harvest, and our bow hunters accounted for 9%. So think about how that's changed over the last several decades. But my point is that a lot of states are starting to see the same exact thing, and I think you guys know, probably if I gave you 3 choices, you'd figure out why. But I'll tell you, it's age. We're getting old, and folks that get old can't use equipment. May not be able to use the vertical bow equipment like they used to. Number 2, for especially the northern states, weather is a major factor, a major deciding factor for a lot of people in terms of participation. Sure. I don't really like sitting in the cold. And the other thing is, think about gun season. Even after we retire, everybody that I talk to is busier than they were when they worked, right?
Right.
And who wants to be obligated to a 7-day gun season? And you've got to make your schedule work around those 7 days. So the bow season just makes sense. And the crossbow, really just, I guess it's the icing on the cake, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
all right.
I think this has been great. It reminded me, I listened to a podcast the other day with a couple people from the QDMA, and one of the programs they're doing, because they're finding, the youth programs are great, but a lot of times those sort of fall flat as far as a hunter adoption, because if a youth doesn't have an adult to take them, then they don't convert into a lifelong hunter like people maybe thought they were going to, and so they've got one program where they're trying to, they're going to farmers markets and things and seeking out adults, and so they've got this program, and they bring adult hunters or people that might be interested in getting their own sort of wild meat and things like that, and they're getting them started on crossbows, and the reason they gave was, we can basically get somebody proficient with a crossbow in a number of hours versus weeks or months with a compound bow. So it just speaks to, I guess, what we've been talking about here for the past, I don't know, however many minutes, just about opportunity and helping to increase hunter numbers as they continue to go down.
Yeah, it's hard to argue. I think even more so than, and I think folks are rethinking the youth seasons and just as you mentioned there, Jason, I think that is, from if you think about it in terms of an investment portfolio, kids need to be part of it, but they certainly cannot be the largest part of it. I think folks are coming to that realization. And so I think anybody that would, there were very few folks that would ever argue against a youth season. I think there's even fewer folks that would argue against a crossbow season, simply because of what it does in terms of sustaining the sport and getting people in the woods. Now, it may not be the spot that you and I, grew up hunting in. You travel 6 hours, you get out in the middle of nowhere. You don't hear dogs barking, you don't hear car doors slamming, but this is all, this may be all they know. They may only know hunting in suburbia, hunting urban park, and what's wrong with that, right?
Yeah. All right, Mike.
All right.
This has been awesome. So like I said, I appreciate you taking time to talk to us, and there's a ton of good content in here for our listeners. So thank you.
Okay, you're very welcome, and I look forward to the next one.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. And that's going to do it for this week's episode. So, like I said, super interesting conversation with Mike. We always enjoy these conversations because we learn a lot every time we talk to Mike. So that gives you kind of an idea of the history of crossbows in this state and kind of how we got to where we are today. And one thing I'm going to ask of you guys is, if you like these kind of episodes with Mike or from other people from the Division of Wildlife or the ODNR, give us some ideas. Let us know what other topics you want covered, what other questions you want answered, and we will do our best to figure out the right person to answer those questions and get those topics covered. So with that, hopefully you guys are having a good hunting season. Hopefully you've had some success. If not, hopefully you've got plans to spend some time in the woods or in a blind or whatever it is you're chasing. Hopefully you've got some plans to do that. And as always, check out our website, ohiohuntsman.com. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram. There's links in our show notes to both of those pages. We're Ohio Huntsman on Facebook, Ohio Huntsman _podcast on Instagram. We're always posting interesting things, updates to our Instagram and Facebook stories about what we're up to, if we're out hunting or whatnot. So check us out there. And if you're interested in any Ohio Huntsman shirts or decals, you can find that on our website as well. So with that, I'm going to let you guys go, and thanks for listening.